In the short term, I think Putin made a move that was necessary to reassert authority, not endorsing the killing, by the way. But the fact of the matter is that Prigozhin had made him look weak, remember, not only because the Wagner group within hours had taken over the headquarters of the Russian command overseeing the Ukraine invasion.
US intelligence reports suggest that the plane perhaps wasn't brought down by a surface-to-air missile. One theory they're looking at is it could have been a bomb on board, but I must stress they said they've not come to any firm conclusions. Well, a man who used to run US intelligence, the former CIA Director General David Petraeus, explained last night on Times Radio what he made of the latest reports.
One of my successors at the CIA has famously said, and he was, of course, the ambassador to Moscow, knows Putin well, said that Putin is one of those who believes that revenge is a dish best eaten cold. And it took a couple of months, but eventually you knew that there had to be an open window or an umbrella with a tip with his name on it, or in this case, perhaps an explosive placed on a plane. But Putin could not allow that blatant challenge by Prigozhin, even given that Prigozhin had eventually backed down, had come to his senses, turned the column around that was en route to Moscow within a couple hundred miles of it. That could not be allowed to stand.
Let's find out more. Professor Scott Lucas, Professor of American Studies, Specialist in US and British Foreign Policy, joins me now. Scott, good morning.
Morning to you, Rosie.
It took 24 hours to hear from President Putin. He made no mention of Prigozhin's mutiny 2 months ago. Didn't explicitly confirm Prigozhin's death. What did we learn from what he did say?
Breaking news. Fox says he's sorry that the chicken's dead. What you had was Putin, for the sake of appearances, again, offering condolences not only to Prigozhin's family, but remember to 9 others, the families of 9 others who died in that crash, including 3 pilots, as well as several leading Wagner Group members. The significant developments lay outside of Putin's statement, which is the analysis which is being done about the visual images of the plane. Intelligence agencies will be gathering their sources in terms of what they know about the event. And I think that despite what Putin has said, we can make an educated, at this point, analysis, not conclusion, but an educated analysis that it is quite likely that Putin has waited 2 months after the Wagner Group's mutiny, and then he's made his move. That he has gotten rid of someone who was a political and a military rival for power, if not to Putin himself, at least to the Russian Defense Ministry, that he has done so after the Russian state, the Kremlin, made arrangements that it could take over the Wagner Group's operations, that it could take over the infrastructure, that it could keep some of the personnel, not only because of the fight in Ukraine, but because Wagner was, of course, the key group overseeing Russia's control of mineral resources in places like Africa and the Middle East.
If it is, as believed, this sort of direct attempt from Putin to eliminate someone who obviously failed in that coup, is Putin now in a stronger position, a weaker one?
Well, I think you look at it short term and then you look at it in the longer term. In the short term, I think Putin made a move that was necessary to reassert authority, not endorsing the killing, by the way. But the fact of the matter is that Prigozhin had made him look weak, remember, not only because the Wagner Group within hours had taken over the headquarters of the Russian command overseeing the Ukraine invasion in the city of Rostov-on-Don. They got within 200 kilometers of Moscow. And that mutiny was not ended by the defeat of Wagner. There was a political deal that was struck. Fact is that's the short term. There were people within Russia's military that did at least sympathize with Prigozhin's aims, even if they didn't believe mutiny was the best way forward. There were people within Russia's political and economic elite who probably sympathized with some of Prigozhin's aims. And Putin now has drawn a line on that. But if he has said to anyone, look, cross me and you do so at your peril, that still is only the short term. In the longer term, he's facing real discontent within Russia, even if it is silently or quietly expressed over the way that the war in Ukraine is going. He is facing discontent over the fact that Russia is suffering economically and that politically Russia is increasingly isolated. So, no, I think this question of Putin's gamble in Ukraine, even if it was defeated in the first few weeks of the war, when he failed to take Kyiv, what was eventually going to happen, both inside Russia and inside Ukraine, was going to be more of a marathon, not a sprint. But Putin has not given himself a better chance of winning that political marathon by getting rid of Prigozhin, because there are others, if the war continues to go badly, who can step up, even if Putin maintains nominal control over the Russian state.
We were hearing from the US, and their analysis is that potentially there was a bomb on board, and they've said that Prigozhin was likely killed in the crash. What do you think are the most convincing theories currently?
Well, I think that's a very interesting U.S. statement, in that there were some analysts, with whom I work and whom I highly respect, who said, look, this may be an anti-air missile that took down Prigozhin's jet. They were looking at the rapid descent. It dropped 8,000 feet within 30 seconds. They were looking at the plume of smoke. But the Pentagon, and usually it wouldn't say this, the Pentagon's actually gone on record and said, no, we're thinking it's a bomb. In other words, this was placed inside the plane. So it's still the same effect, but a somewhat different operation. So the Americans are tipping off, yeah, we know something about this. We don't have conclusive proof what happened, but we do have information that is not in public domain yet that lets us think that. I think that's a signal to the Russians that the Americans know what's going on, or they have a pretty good idea what's going on. And I think it's a signal that the U.S. is working with other intelligence agencies to very quickly assess what has happened.
Final thing I want to ask you about, Scott, the two sort of big stories of yesterday sort of connect to each other. Who will be the next American president? Putin presumably watching very closely what's happening, because who sits in the White House could embolden President Putin in his invasion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Rosie. I mean, we can take two stories that came out of the United States. There was at least, I think, two of the Republican presidential candidates on Wednesday night, the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and the businessman Vivek Ramaswamy, who said they would cut American aid to Ukraine as part of the international coalition helping Kyiv defend itself. But of course, the guy that you really want to talk about, I suspect, is the man who is now a criminal defendant in his fourth set of indictments, facing 91 felony charges, Vladimir Putin's friend, Donald Trump. And beyond all the historic legal consequences of what is going to happen in 2024, with the first former president to be indicted not just one, but four times, with the political significance for the U.S. at one of the most important moments in its history. If Donald Trump, the man who tried to stage a coup in January 2021, was to be legally elected to the White House, even while facing prison, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin's friend, a man who expressed admiration for Putin, who in some ways supported Russia's goals, including the seizure of part of Ukraine, occupied Crimea. If Donald Trump comes into the White House in 2025 and is allowed to take the oath of office, it is a significant threat to not just Ukraine, but to the rules of the game, the international order, which has given peace and security for many countries since the end of World War II.